recommendations within the accreditation report, with the understanding that they would not have had them all completed at that point. Subsequent to the 2-year progress report, the principal has been asked to submit 2 additional special progress reports. Most of it, but not all of it, to continue to monitor what's happening with the issues related to the facility and what resolution, plans, timeline, funding, etc. may or may not have taken place. Let me say to you, and I met with the Board of Selectmen for about 45 minutes this evening before I came here. I think it's important for everybody in the audience to know that the people who work in this building and in this school system, central office, have done a tremendous amount of work in implementing that accreditation report in terms of teaching and learning, instruction, curriculum, assessment processes. They've done a lot. But there are things they do not have control over. And I think therein lies the concern related to the facility and the funding concerns. I know there's an override vote coming up. I saw some signs on my way in off the highway. These are difficult economic times throughout New England, the country, the world. I keep hearing that Massachusetts is doing better than most. But, you know, we just keep rolling along. And one of the selectmen asked me, do the commission members take that into consideration? Yes, they do. They've been very patient with schools, and it's been discussed several times. But at some point in time, schools have to be able to demonstrate that they have made reasonable progress within a reasonable period of time to address all of the issues. So this is our 10-year cycle. And in year 7, 7.5, we ask a school to submit a pre-self-study report, which is a very brief report, which basically says to us, what have you done to go back and review your mission? You now have analytic rubrics. Have you looked at the standards again in preparation for the next self-study? We revise our standards, refine them every 5 years. And it's done by committees of educators, not the 4 of us on the professional staff. And we don't make the decisions. The commission makes almost every decision about a school's accreditation, with 2 exceptions. One, if we're bringing a new school in as a candidate, or we're bringing a school in that's been through candidacy and is seeking to become a full member. Those decisions are made by our Board of Trustees, which is the governing body of the association. Emphasis of the standards. Now you have the standards, and we're not going to, take hours. I could do a 2-hour activity with you this evening on understanding the standards and how they work. But for the sake of discussion here and your awareness, some of the major concepts within these standards, and again, they're qualitative standards. They're based on research and practice. Schools are dynamic social institutions. They change all the time. Every day is different in a school. There are no 2 days that are ever the same. Trust me. I see people smiling who might work in schools. Accountability for essential learning for all students. There is a real focus on each student, every student within these standards. Not just the kids going to college, not just students served, who might be going off to alternative schools or a vocational school program, all students. That there's a reflective school culture. That the professional staff is reflective, they have time to think, discuss, collaborate about what's happening in their school, about decisions they may make. Professional development, some of it at least, is connected to teaching and learning based on best practice. 11 years ago, we asked schools to start using rubrics as a form of assessment to determine the extent to which individual students were meeting the academic expectations. And it's taken many of our schools 5 to 6 years to develop a comfort level with those rubrics. But that's what research talked about. We know now, based on research, that holistic rubrics are not as effective with kids as analytic rubrics are. So we're asking schools starting in 2011 to transition from holistic rubrics to analytic rubrics. They may need some professional development related to that. It will depend on the school. Strong instructional leadership, and let me say, not just by the administrative staff in the building. Teachers, our standards, the standard on leadership and organization talks about teachers assuming leadership roles, and they do. If you have students here in the school, you probably know who some of those teachers are. Your students certainly do. We want students to have opportunities to be leaders. Personalization. There are any number of ways in which a student's education is personalized within the classroom and outside of the classroom. And that is a concept you would see if you took the time and we mapped the standards this evening, you would find personalization throughout these standards by design. Formative assessment. Well, we live in the Commonwealth. We know that the Department of Education in Massachusetts, and while we work with each of the departments of education, we are not members of any Department of Education. We know that in Massachusetts, the only one of the 6 states in New England, in order for a student to graduate from high school, he or she must have successfully passed MCAS. And when those MCAS scores first counted at the high school level, people would call, the press would call, parents would call and say, how can you accredit high school A or B or C? Because, you know, they've got so many kids that didn't pass MCAS. They've been called failing schools. Wonderful name, failing schools. But that's what they were called. Why? Because that's not the only way you assess the effectiveness of a school and how students learn. It's very simple, in our view. And formative assessments provide students with other types of opportunities to demonstrate their learning. Portfolios, projects, exhibitions, student-led conferences, any number of ways. Those are formative assessments. Kids get to reflect on their own learning, assess their own learning. Georgetown High School has actually developed a process by which parents are going to be informed about how their students are doing individually, their children are doing, in meeting those academic expectations. And that's not based on a test score. It's based on formative assessment results. Equity, equity of opportunity, equity of access to programs and services, equity to after-school programs and services. And if you look at our standards, we use the term co-curricular, not extracurricular. They're not extra. They're part of the curriculum. This is how students learn. Anybody in the room a coach or has ever been a coach? Okay, how do students demonstrate what you're trying to teach them as a coach or model for them? How do you see that as a coach? Put you on the spot.
I'm not sure exactly the question.
What did you coach?
Soccer.
Okay, so let's just say the school has an academic expectation about decision making, or they have a civic expectation about showing respect, and you've talked to your team about respect. Do you see that on the field?
Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's beyond the classroom. That's beyond the walls of the school. You indicated you were a coach. What do you coach? Soccer, okay. Anything you want to add?
Instilling that sense of opportunity and responsibility, and then seeing the participant, whether it's a classroom or the field or a social opportunity, and the child putting those skills and that trust to work is action.
Yeah, problem solving, thinking, decision making, all kinds of things. So it's beyond the classroom as well. And that the facility supports programs and services, all of them, every one of them. And that there's adequate and consistent funding. So those are concepts woven throughout the standards. There's an impact on the facility in the delivery of instruction and delivery of the curriculum. We have an extensive website. We have an association website. Any of you folks here been on our website? When you have time, and you have, obviously, you have the address here on the handout. Very extensive website, and it's used a lot by our membership. Maybe not so much by community and parents and students, although I had a parent today call me. There's a vote in her community for feasibility study to build a new high school, and I asked her if she had children in the school, if they'd graduated. She said yes. One graduated in 1979, and the other one in 1980-something, and she said, and I'm going to support that new school. She said people supported the school. She'd been on our website. She knew about the standards, was absolutely amazed. I said, congratulations. So there's an association website, and then we have a commission website. And there's all kinds of information on there for you to look at when you have some time. Please note that we have, can you just, that's okay. We have policies, we have a policy and procedures manual. The commission does, each commission does, approved by the commission, approved by the Board of Trustees. We also have some guidelines, and one of the things I wanted to point out this evening, click, Dana, thank you. Schools with facilities deficiencies, we have a guideline on this, and it was cited in our most recent correspondence to the high school. And basically, this is what it says. Schools placed on warning for facilities deficiencies are expected to develop a plan and timeline to resolve them within 2 years, and to seek and secure funding to resolve such deficiencies within 5 years. Remember I said that the high school's 5-year report is due the middle of May. Failure to demonstrate such proactive efforts and progress will prompt the commission to place such schools on probation. Now the commission makes the decisions. And one of the reasons, well, the most important reason that we provided additional time for the report is so that we can learn the results of your override. Because you may remember I used the term reasonable progress within a reasonable period of time. And every school is assessed based on its own information. We don't compare schools. Even within the same district, we don't compare schools. Things play out differently even within a multiple high school district. In Boston, we have 16 or 17 high schools we accredit. They're all different. They're similar in some ways, but they're all different in other ways. And I've talked to you about some of the concepts within the standards: personalization, equity, collaboration. I referenced earlier in terms of the reflective school culture, student engagement, again, best practices, how do we teach. A lot of our schools have had in-service training on differentiated instruction, how to personalize it, responses to intervention, all kinds of new approaches that are out there that seem to be quite effective. Here's some specific information, and this is really just a kind of a summary, and then I've got a couple more things, and then we'll take some time for questions. Hosted a team in March of 2006. One of the things that I always want to be certain I mention is that whenever the commission reviews a report, and that report was written by 15 or 16 educators, based on the self-study, based on their 4 days here in the school, using the standards as the foundation for their findings. We always commend schools for work they have done in demonstrating continued progress. So I'm always concerned that the public just looks at what the concerns are, and that's important, but there's a balance here to this process. And as I indicated earlier, people in this school have worked very hard in doing a number of things to improve the school based on the standards, based on school initiatives and district initiatives as well, and the more you can integrate those, the more effective it is. So don't ever lose sight of the commendations. So they hosted a team. We had the initial letter, always the original goes to the principal, CC to the superintendent, CC to the school committee. a CC to the chair of the commission, who currently is a principal from Connecticut. And in this first letter, it also goes to the chair of the visiting